Hey everyone, today we're just going to go through how to skin our deform bones to our mesh. So there are a billion ways to do this, different methods for each, everyone has their own sort of way in which they'd like to do this. But today we're going to go with using a cage mesh, basically a simplified version of our model, and skin that to our bones, and then transfer those skin weights to our high resolution mesh here. So, what do we have to do first? So, firstly, we have to determine which joints we want to be skinned to our body. So, in our case, I want all my deformed joints, basically, all these basic joints that I made at the beginning of my rig to be skinned to the body. Now there are some other joints here that are currently being used as mechanism joints, so things that just help make the rig work. Otherwise, I've kept it pretty simple for this piece with just some simple joint layout. I don't have a completed rig here today because I have left my hard drive at work. However, this setup will be enough to get the point across. Alright, so what do I mean by a cage mesh? So a cage mesh in some regards could be something that directly influences our high resolution mesh, or it could be a platform in which to transfer properties across to our high resolution mesh and have that work independently from the cage mesh. So a cage mesh is generally going to be lower polygon count than our base mesh, and it's going to be used to transfer information across to the high resolution mesh. So let's get started. So to get started, let's just make a simple cube. We'll bring it up to the center of our body, like so, holding down V to snap it. For some reason it's not snapping perfectly. Let me just turn off my geometry for a second. Polygons. There we go. Oops, pushed the wrong button. Polygons on, joints on. Alright, we're going to scale this cube up to fit generally around our torso, and this will be the start point for our extrusions. So basically what we're going to do, we're just going to extrude a very basic sort of version of our joints, of our character. Another way would be to just simply copy this geometry, make a duplicate, and then basically destroy a bunch of the edge loops, remove them away from out of the joint setup. But that's a bit arduous for this tutorial, so I'm just going to go with a very simple sort of mesh setup for this one. Alright, so let's start matching our cube to our geometry. So first things first, let's just freeze the transforms as like that for now, and then we're going to make a single edge loop down the center 3 times, and then we're going to turn on symmetry. Alright, so let's just quickly add a new layer so we can just accidentally click on our high resolution mesh. So I'm going to create a new layer from selected. I'm going to call this geometry high res geo. Save that. I'm going to reference that so I don't accidentally click it all the time. I'm going to do the same, just make sure that's not the same layout. Alright, cool. So with everything else, I'm going to just transfer that to a new layer of its own. So I'm going to add selected objects and call that joints. There we go, that will do. And we don't need our controls for now, so we're just going to hide those for now by disabling our NURBS curves. Alright, so let's unhide my cube. Last hidden. Alright, so let's get going. Alright, so in edge mode, select your edges and then go to insert edge loop tool. I'm going to add 3 divisions for now. Push enter. Alright, we're going to turn on our symmetry for our object X, and I'm going to bring these edges in. Make sure you select the entire edge loop, and then we're going to bring those in a little bit, just so we have a bit of leeway for our legs. Alright, I'm going to turn on X-ray, just so I can see what's going on. And basically, I'm going to trace the outline of my body according to my joint setup. So the reason why I'm going to be doing my extrusions at the point of each joint is because when I skin it, it should fit perfectly around. The weights should fit perfectly along those edge loops. So I'm basically going to add extrusions at the same point of our joints. So let me just turn on my smart duplicate settings. I'm going to turn on shift drag to extrude. And now when I hold down shift, I can extrude. I should be able to extrude a new edge or new faces up the body. So let's just select our faces, hold down shift, and it should extrude a new set of faces. And that's not working because I don't know why. Okay, so it seems that when you have smart select or smart duplicate turned on with object X symmetry turned on, it doesn't want to work properly. It starts dragging up the entire box. But there's a cheat. We have to hold down shift and push extrude face, and then we can start extruding as needed. So I'm just going to go to my modeling tool set, go to edit mesh, detach that, and I'm just going to have that on the side with my extrude options there. That can just fuck off. Alright. Make sure that X-ray is on every section. Alright, so let's start extruding. I'm going to line it up with my joints basically. Extrude at the point of every major point of articulation for our joints, using both sides as needed on all planes. So just going to keep doing that until I've finished the majority of the body, and then once I get to the hands, I will come back and tell you how to do that. Now the reason why I added 3 edge loops in the middle from the beginning is basically for the legs. So I want to keep a little bit of a gap between the legs when I want to extrude these, so that's why I've put those 3 edge loops. So as you can see, when I extrude now, I'm left with a bit of a leggy sort of edge. Now for the chest, we still want to kind of follow the same sort of edge flow overall when we're doing our our little basic sort of skin cage. So I'm just going to make a quick edge loop, insert edge loop. I'm going to give it a single edge loop. A simpler way would simply be extrude out a face, delete the face at the bottom, and then select the edge there, and then bring it in line with your shoulders. just like that. And then we have a nice even edge flow going from the chest up to the shoulders. And then we can extrude out our arms. You can see that there's a bit of a skewing there in the arm, so I'm just going to scale that straight, in line with the elbow joint. And then I'm going to keep on extruding. I might actually scale that in a bit more here as well, while I'm doing that. There we are. Okay, and then we're just going to keep on extruding until we're done. Okay, as you can see, I've got a basic sort of outline of my body, and now it's just a matter of fitting the cage mesh to the shape of my body. So let's do that now. With the head, it's going to be a little bit trickier because we have our neck and our jaw joint sort of, well, our neck and our jaw kind of overlapping one another in terms of its space. So I'm going to bring in these faces right in line with the neck, about so, and then kind of scale them in as well in both sides. To fit. Just making sure they're still in line with the joints. And then I'm just going to extrude out a head to fit the face. And then I'm going to bring down that face, the edges down there, to fit the jaw. Alright. And again at the back. Just to fit it into place. And then one more on the side. 1, 2, 3. So I can extrude and fit the face. There we go. That will do. Alright. Now, the one thing we need to fix up still are the hands. Now, that one's a little bit trickier because you might want to... There's two ways you can go about skinning the hands. And one of those is to basically do a pre-skin of sorts between the joints and these the original mesh, and it will just transfer all those weights to that hand. Or you can basically take some time to build out a basic skin cage of your hand to follow the geometry and do that. For this, I'm just going to do a pre-skin, so at least then it has the influences of those joints, and then transfer the weights of my skin cage to my high res. So with our skin cage done, we're now ready to at least skin our very basic low res mesh. Now, before we do that, let's set up a selection set for our deformed joints. Basically, select all the joints we want to skin to our body, and then create a selection set that allows us to click it again if we ever have to reskin from scratch. So, let's go ahead and do that now. Let's add this to a new layer, add our skin cage to a new layer, create layer from selected, and we're going to call this one skin cage. I'm going to turn that off for now. Alright. Let's turn off our geo setup. And now we're going to go to select all by type, and push joints. Now, for me, there's a few exceptions that in terms of joints that I don't want to have selected, because basically some of them are just mechanism joints, and it's up to you which ones to select, because every rig is different. But you should know which joints you want to be skinned to your particular setup. So in my case, I don't want my original hip joint and my original chest joint to be skinned. I want these larger joints to be skinned. So I've got to go through my outliner and make sure I'm deselecting some specific joints. So that's my hip up there, and for me it will be not that one, it is up here, this one here, I think. Yep, I don't want that one. Ugh, my mistake. There we go. So with all my joints selected, and for some reason my foot joints aren't selected, I'm going to select those now, make sure they're selected. Alright, with all these joints selected, I'm going to create a new selection set by going to Create, Sets, Quick Select Set. I'm going to give it a name, and because I want it to be part of my rigging tool set, I'm going to have my rigging panel selected, and I'm going to call this Skin. Push Add to Shelf. Alright. Now with that done, let's go and turn on our skin cage, and actually we'll turn on our high res first, unreference it, and then we're going to do a quick skin by selecting our geometry. Then we're going to select our skeleton, and then we're going to select our geometry, and then we're going to go to our rigging tool set. We're going to go to skin and bind skin, and you can use any settings you like for your particular setup. I'm going to go with joint hierarchy. I'm going to have selected joints instead, because I have some joints that I don't want to be skinned. I'm going to go with closest distance, and actually I'll go with geodesic voxel. I'm going to go with weight blended, and allow multiple bind poses turned on, max influences of 3. So that basically means that for any particular vertex on your mesh being skinned, only 3 joints can actually influence it at any given time. I'm going to give this a fall off of 1, because I only want one. I'm only having one joint affect a particular region when I come. Well, it doesn't really matter with this skin, because basically I'll be changing the skinning for the most part across the entire mesh, except for the hands. But I'm going to keep it to a fall off of 1. Actually, I'll give it 0.9. Basically, the higher the number, the tighter the skin is. Basically, so the less influence that say basically, if I'm rigging my elbow, it's going to be a tighter influence of this joint across the entire arm. So basically, instead of being a really soft influence where like this joint will influence the entire arm, it will only affect a smaller region basically. So I'm going to have that fall off as 0.9, and my resolution with my geodesic voxel set to 512, and I'm going to push remove unused influences, because I find that causes issues. when using geodesic voxels. Alright, and then I'm going to click apply. Let it process. This may take a few minutes or a few seconds depending on your mesh. Okay, so I got a basic skin across my my joint setup. So sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. Well, in this case it's working quite well with my high res, except around the head, for instance. I've got a lot of issues there. And if we go to my legs, oh, I'm missing a joint. Let's redo that. So as you can see, I've accidentally skinned multiple joints to my skin mesh. The ones that I don't want to have selected, I didn't realize. So I got to go back and make a new selection set and remove those joints that I don't want to be skinned. So I'm going to quickly stop my recording and do that now. Alright guys, so I'm back. Here we are. I've made a new selection set and I've already skinned my mesh to my rig setup. So I basically just removed the joints that I didn't need at this time. But for you, just gotta make sure that you're selecting the right joints at any given time for your skin. So let's keep inspecting our rig. So our legs are looking pretty good. There's still a bit of compression going on there. And our feet are looking alright, but when we move our hip, for instance, when we start moving our upper thigh, see how it caves in like that? We're getting a little bit of tearing there because of the influences affecting that area. Now, we could weight paint all this stuff and fix it all up, but because of the density of the mesh, this could lead to all kinds of issues. It could be more troublesome than it seems. It could just be a lot of time spent doing a lot of cleanup when we could be spending time animating. So the solution to that is to use our low-res skin cage to do that. So with that in mind, let's take a look at when we skin our low-res mesh setup. So recording. All right. One thing I forgot to do with this skin cage is to delete the history. So let's unbind the skin and then go to edit, delete by type, history, and delete history. Then let's select our skin cage and then add a bind skin. Alright. So we're still getting some deformation there. As you can see, there's some influence coming from up in the upper arm there, which we didn't need. Upper body looks alright. And our head is getting influenced by the neck still. So here is why we've chosen such a low res setup. Basically, we did this so we can easily skin or change the weights of these influences with a single 1-to-1, 100% weighting on each edge loop. So basically at the knee, there's going to be a 50-50 split between our thigh and our shin, but in places like our spine, where it's lined up perfectly along the middle of our spine, we're going to have a 100% weighting of that joint along those points. At the elbow, it will be 100%. For instance, here, 100% along the spine here, and it'll be a 50-50 split at the elbow here along that influence there. In the head, instead of having to skin or weight paint a bunch of different vertices, all we have to skin is our front vertices here, here, and here along the back, and then 100% weighting of the neck along those joints there. So let's work on that and just quickly inspect what we might be missing. So for me, I'm missing an edge loop around the hip here. So I need to add another edge loop there. So I'm just going to quickly do that now. I'm going to unbind the skin of this. I'm going to add a new edge loop just along here somewhere. So I'm going to bring that up to around there. Alright, cool. I'm going to delete the history again, and then I'm going to reskin. And resume our progress. Alright, with that in mind, we have everything skinned up. Now we have to just weight paint our low res mesh. So to do that, we're going to use the paint skin weights tool. We're going to double click on our paint skin weights tool. I'm going to turn on the color ramp just so I can see how everything's working. And then I'm going to work from the hips outwards. So with our hips, where is our hip? Spine 01. I'm going to work with that. Let's just double check with my controls how that's working. That's working fine. Cool. Alright. Because we have such a simple geometry, all I need to do is basically paint 100% on that hip joint. So let's go through that process now. I'm going to bring down my stylus stroke radius to 1 so I can actually select things. I'm going to keep my opacity at 1 and my value at 1. So basically 100% weighting on these vertices. So they should turn bright red or turn like a hot white, like that. So basically I'm just going to keep on doing that until they turn white. Here we are. Cool. Now the next joint, we're going to give that 100% weighting. And basically I do this process all the way up the spine. So with a region like the thighs, we want to have a 50-50 split between our hip joint and our hip leg joint. So basically I'm going to give this 100% weighting across the points where the thigh starts and the hip ends at first. And then I'm going to give this vertices a 50% weighting on the thighs on each side. So I'm going to grab my thigh, I'm going to give it a value of 0.5, and then I'm going to draw on exactly 50%. Alright. At the same time, I'm going to give it exactly 50% along the knees as well. Actually, I'll put it up to 100% on the knees. Alright. Do the same thing on my left side. 100% on the knees. And then 50%, 0.5 along my hips. Alright, there we are. Alright, and basically work our way down the chain until we get to the very end. Exactly there. Right, let's just try out the ones we've already made. So if I rotate this knee, it should rotate exactly at a 50% weighting, and as you can see, it kind of does. It's still compressing along the very, it's starting to lose volume, but that's because of the lack of geometry. So hopefully by the time we transfer these weights, we won't have as much of this issue. But notice how if we move the thigh now, we aren't getting that same problem along the hip. If we move our upper body, we're getting some nice clean distribution of our weights along our spine, which is great. So just a process of doing that over until we get until our neck and head, and then we should be able to transfer these weights across and see what happens. Alright. Do the same for the shoulders. Let's see how these deform first. Yeah, the shoulders are looking alright actually, so I'm not going to play with those too much. Getting some compression there in the bicep, so I might increase the influence of this joint here, the chest joint, to this bottom of the arm, but otherwise it looks okay. Yeah, that'll do. That looks a little bit better. That'll do for this one. Alright, now onto the neck. Let's actually have a quick look at the arm. So the arm isn't really deforming very well because it's getting too much influence from other parts of the body. So let's quickly do that first before we move on to the neck. Alright. Now, even though that our little low-res mesh ends at the wrist, we still want to give this part of the arm a bit of influence from the wrist, simply because it's still going to be animated. You still have to have some sort of influence from the wrist, so we still have to give it a 50% influence there. So from the wrist, we're just going to give this little area a weighting of 0.5. And we'll leave it at that. Now, to make our lives easier, instead of doing the other side as well, I'm just going to click on my skin. I'm going to go to skin and then mirror weights. I can click on YZ and it should work. Let's have a go. So if I look at my skin weights on the other side, it should be the same. Let's go to our right side of our arm, for instance. Yeah, that looks about right. We've still got a bit of asymmetry there, but we can get rid of that. Unfortunately, the mirror skin weights isn't perfect. Alright, let's give that a go. And that looks like it works a lot better. It's actually following the joints now. So that, I think, is ready to be used as a transfer. Except for the head, we'll just quickly do the head now. And then try transferring these weights across. Alright. Go to our body. Let's select our head. We're going to give our head joint 100% weighting across, obviously, the head vertices. Fortunately, it can be a bit finicky. How about we just select our... Let's actually paint select our vertices. Actually, I'm going to just use the select option. Select our vertices. Let's turn off bone selection, unfortunately, because it doesn't seem to work very well when you work with both things visible. And select these vertices around the head. I'm going to go back into my paint selection and then click, make sure my value is set to 1 and my bone is set to deform head, and push flood. That looks alright. There's a few little stray verts that I forgot to select, so I'm going to select those now. 1, 2, and that should be right. Back into the game. Push flood again. Perfect. Now I have to deselect those verts before I can start working with the rest of the setup again. So object mode. And then I'm going to remove the influence of the neck, the head from the neck a little bit. I might actually give the upper neck a 50% weighting as well. So let's just first remove the influences. Alright. And for these joints, these verts here, I'm going to give it a 50% split. Across those ones, there we are. Alright. Let's have a look at the neck. Make that nice and even across. Neck 2, 50%. And I think that should do it for now. Now I'm going to remove the influence of the neck on this part of the body as well. Value 1. The neck doesn't have to influence the chest, for instance. So I'm just cleaning that up. Alright, let's give that a go. So if I grab the head, make sure my joint selection is turned on this time. Alright, that looks okay to me. Obviously the neck is influencing the chest a little bit too much, so let's just remove that. and completely remove that influence. Alright. Now let's try. Okay, that looks much better. Yep, that looks good. That looks good. Alright, so it looks like we're about ready to start transferring the skin weights from this low res model to the high res of our mesh. Alright, cool. Okay, so with that in mind, there's a few things you need to know about transferring weights. One, your high res mesh needs to have already been skinned to your joint setup, and they have to be the same joints. Alright, that's the main point. So it won't skin, you won't be able to transfer skin weights unless your high res mesh has already been skinned to the same rig. So I've already skinned it, so if you look at my setup here, like the hands are already working, they've already got some influence, and they're working quite well on the hands, which is why I didn't want to bother doing a cage around the hands. So they're working quite well. Alright, so to transfer skin weights, we select our mesh. I'm going to save it for now. Select our low res, then our high res, go to skin, copy skin weights with options, and I'm just going to go with the defaults reset settings. So I'm just going to go with closest joint and closest point on surface. We'll click on normalize and see how that goes. We'll push apply, and now if I hide our low res, ooh, look at that. We'll get some really cartoony transforms. But our middle body's looking really good. Now there's a reason why that's happening basically. So the reason why the middle looks awesome and our arms look really cartoony and rounded is simply because our skin cage didn't have enough geometry basically. So we actually have to add more geometry to that setup. Basically we have to have a tighter gradient around there, so we can do that in a second. But our torso is looking really good. It's getting some nice deformation. That's because when you look at our undo, select all, display, show all. When you look at our skin cage, every joint has a vertex that can be 100% weighted. Whereas with our thighs, we're getting a graduation from 1 to 0 or 0.5 along the knee, right down the thigh. So we actually have to add extra edge loops, at least around here, to get a tighter deformation. So we can do that. But at least we can do that with a low res cage instead of having to deal with the high res and not have to worry too much about reskinning. So let's go about doing that now and see how that works. Alright, I'm just going to pause the recording and add these loops. Okay, so I've added some new loops. So as you can see, I've added some loops, one down the center of the bicep, one down the center of the forearm, one down the center of the thigh and one down the center of the shins, and I've added 2 loops around the edges of our the point of articulation around the elbows and the knees. So the reason why we're doing that is so we could add an extra bit of influence from the biceps and the elbows as needed. So for instance, this loop in the middle will be 100% weighted to the bicep. So let's do that now by going to paint skin weights. We're going to select our bicep, and I'm going to give that 100% weighting right down the center of those vertices. So right down the center, 100% weighting. And you'll see what happens once I transfer those weights again. And for now, I'm going to give 100% weighting just around those new loops around the elbow as well. I'm not going to touch the 50% weighting around the middle loop though. There we are. I'm going to do the same thing along the forearm, 100%. I'm going to push select instead of that. Turn off joint selection. Go to here. Go to flood. Select paint. Flood. Select those. Paint. Flood. What am I selecting here? Jesus Christ. Forearm. Flood. Doesn't like me selecting those things, does it? Bicep. So I'm just going to quickly reskin that. And as you can see, weight painting is an arduous process that requires a lot of trial and error. And unfortunately, I have to reskin my body. So I'm going to quickly do that and get back to you in a second. Alright, so I've reskinned it. I basically just transferred the weights back from my high res to my low res and still has the same sort of deformation. As you can see, it's still a bit cartoony. So basically, I'm just going to give our loops an extra weighting across the bicep. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's have a look. Turn on that. Select our bicep. 100% weighting across here. Someone else use select. Turn off bone selection. Select here and select here. I'm going to go to back to paint. Push flood on the bicep. Now my forearm. I'm going to push select. Select these and this and this. Go back to paint. Push flood. And also get rid of that influence on the forearm as well. Let's just delete all that. Forearm and push 0% in flood. There we go. Alright, so we have that side sorted. So when I move this bicep now, or this joint, it's going to get tighter. See how tight that deformation is there now on that skin cage? Much tighter. And we're going to do the same along these leg joints. So we'll just disable bone selection there. Vertices, select those. Left. Where is my thighs? Make sure your object X is turned off when you're doing the skin weight stuff. Thigh. Okay, thigh. Shin. So thigh, number 1. Oh, God damn it. Flood. Shin. Select you and you and you. Paint. Flood. Alright. Select all of you and go. Flood. Alright, so let's have a look at that deformation now. Again, a much tighter deformation when you see the actual geometry there. Alright, so let's just quickly clean that up and go to skin, mirror skin weights, and see how that looks. Alright, cool. So that's looking good on the mirror skin. Our biceps and elbows looking good. That's looking good. Head is looking good. Alright, so now we're ready to transfer those weights again. So let's go to our skin. We're going to go to our reference. We're going to go our skin cage, and then we're going to go to our our mesh, skin, copy skin weights. Now let's turn off our skin cage and give this one a whirl again. Oof, much nicer. And then you can smooth those out as needed across the elbow. So as you can see, nice tight deformation there. Obviously it's probably a bit too tight in our case. We're still missing a bit of tightness around there because we didn't fix up those skin weights. But if we go to our thigh, especially around our knees and stuff, it's looking much better than it used to. So again, we can go to our skin cage and clean those up a bit more. And just reference everything else and go to our skin cage and start adding a bit more tightness by skinning these loops here. So we'll just select those vertices, go to our shoulder and our biceps. Shoulder L, shoulder R. Alright, so our bicep is 100% there. Flood. Yep. And we'll mirror those skin weights again. Give that a go. Okay, it's a bit tighter now. Cool. And we'll do the same thing on these thighs. Select these vertices. Go to here. select our thighs. There we go. Give that 100%. Alright. And we'll mirror those as well. Alright, so let's try that again. Unreference everything. Select our skin cage, our high res, skin, copy skin weights, and now let's try that one out. So getting a much better deformation than we did at the start. And this is the merits of using a skin cage to animate, or not animate, to transfer skin weight data across to a high-res mesh. The nice thing is that you work from a basic framework and then work your way up if you need to, rather than having to go from a high-res framework and then working your way down, which can be a lot more difficult and a lot more painful going forward. So I suggest, if you want to, make a basic skin cage and then use that to transfer your weights. As you can see, we've still got a few issues here, but it's a lot more manageable to fix going forward than having to work with the high res entirely. So I'll just turn on the off X-ray, and you'll see what I mean. See what I mean? It's a much nicer sort of deformation, and that's actually manageable from an animation standpoint. At least when doing test animation, you can actually get some good deformation out of that, and good articulation and animation out of that. So working with that skin cage method allows for nice clean transfer of weights without having to do a lot of weight painting. Alright, so I suggest you give that a go and see how you go by next week, and I'll see you then. Good luck.